But like what's really important there, breaking that stuff down, like for me, is learning vulnerabilities, learning. So you have learning and you have execution of what you've learned. And there I'm going to either time box myself into execution of what I've learned, and I can really easily time box it. I can just say I'm going to do an hour of hacking or 2 hours of hacking. Or I can, if I really like, if I haven't, like, for example, if I haven't learned cross-site scripting fully yet, then I need to know where do I want to be in cross-site scripting. Really, really tough question. What exactly do I want to know in cross-site scripting? When is it enough for me? I call that my acceptance criteria. And those acceptance criteria for new learning is what I can break down into a syllabus for myself. And then it takes real discipline to follow that syllabus because you don't have a boss, or you didn't have a mom or dad, or you didn't have a teacher telling you you have to do this now and this today and this tomorrow and that the day afterwards. Now, again, why do I say blocks of an hour? This is a super important thing because you want to be able to start and stop a task really in an hour time. You don't want to have to reserve 4 or 5 hour blocks because then, if you have an hour time, you might want to work on that 4 or 5 hour block, but you'll have to get restarted every single time. Like if you stop and start, that takes some time to think, takes some time to get in the zone again. So if you can break that 4 hour task down, you've already done that getting in and out of the zone because you've already broken it down into those pieces. So how do I break stuff down? I write down exactly where I want to go. I write down exactly what I have to do to get there. Then I write it down into blocks. I try to break it down into manageable blocks. Then I execute my plan and then I fail miserably to keep to my original promise. Like my original estimates are terrible. I I am horrible at estimating. Maybe a day in advance, like maybe 2 days in advance, I can estimate well, but give it a month and I'm totally off. But that's okay. It's an estimation. It's not something set in stone.
Yeah. One thing that you said huge leaps aren't taken in the industry. Yet you said that starting off, you were able to find 30 vulnerabilities in 2 months, correct?
Yeah, but
Let's
I've
dig
had
in.
Like I had 7 years of IT experience behind me at that point, or 8 years even. I've been a programmer, I've been a network engineer, I've been a QA engineer, I've built websites, so I had a lot of that stuff with me already. And I'm a quirky tester. I'm a very quirky tester. What do I mean by that? I'll break your application in ways you didn't even think of by throwing random strings at an endpoint, which will then return me information that I need. Or, like, for example, if I'm IDOR hunting, I'm going to check the import files as well because they might contain an identifier, etc. So I was looking for things that other people just weren't looking for, like global
Yeah.
access control. And what I have is I've got autism. So for me, it can be easy to go through the same website 20 times over with different user profiles because I've already done that. Like, I, I don't care. It's fun for me. Every time I go through it, I find something new anyway. So I just do that. And that really helps me because other people don't want to do that. They're lazy at that point. And how do I know that? Because I often find like 4 or 5 or 6 vulnerabilities, report them, and one is going to be a duplicate. Now, there's a fallacy of testing that you need to know, which is called the clustering of defects, meaning that if you have one defect, you're likely to have a defect of the same magnitude in the same module, or you're going to have a that same bug somewhere else in the application because programmers have the tendency to keep creating the same bugs. They're not going to check the bug in one day, It gets through the code review. Well, the next day they're not going to change that, of course. So that is the clustering of bugs. That's an important concept to understand. If you find something, look around that specific spot for other things or look in other locations for that bug.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you talk about having like a quirky approach to security, something that's a little bit different. And you specifically said CI/CD of security. So as tech companies are continuously deploying, uh, your fines should be standard across all these different deployments. Like, how do you think? Let's talk more about how you think that this kind of principle should be more adopted into the industry in general.
So what I think is that base coverage is a very important thing. Now, you have a really good coverage already in things like ZAP, Burp Suite, other vulnerability scanners to a degree. Also, kind of terrible. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I built my labs specifically to get around these scanners. They find like four or five. I have 150 labs. So that's one thing. Plus, people often don't know how to use vulnerability scanners as well. So they won't use it authenticated. They'll only use it unauthenticated. They'll put that in the CI/CD pipelines. Won't work properly. Of course not. Now, what you can do for that, in my opinion, is tailor make a specific API security testing thingy. Why not UI testing? Because UI is made to protect user from their own stupidity. API is meant to protect the server from that specific user. Now, if you can make API calls automatically, there is nothing stopping you from loading a list into those API endpoint calls and making it a SQL injection list, and maybe even making it a cross-site scripting list, see if you get reflection or not. And if you get reflection, you might be able to get to the website, exploit that specific call. So at that point, we can test for broken access control, a lot of specific injection types, and even business logic because we can automate it. We can automate specific calls that follow up on each other. We call it end-to-end testing. So that is a very important one, that end-to-end testing story. Once you have it set up properly, it's really hard to break down because you know now how that logic works, how it should work. And if it doesn't work as it's supposed to anymore, alarm bells go ringing. That's an important one, but it requires custom scripts. Now, should you run vulnerability scanners? Of course. Even though I find them a bit crap, you should definitely run them, but you should see them as like a second junior hunter that you're training and you're giving commands to, like the intern that always has to copy all the CSV files into God knows what. That's your vulnerability scanner. So definitely see it as that, but also look manually for stuff. That's super,
Yeah.
super important.
And let's talk about certs because you're the first person I think I've talked to who has their own cert. Like, what is there? I was having a conversation with someone at DEF CON about what gives someone the legal right to put down a copyright on like a GitHub repo. What gave you the how intensive a course do you feel like someone needs to make in order to say that their cert is like a valuable cert that people should use? And like what is the process for getting your cert like?
So first of all, every single cert is useless. I don't believe in certifications, but why are they
Not a lot.
useful in the industry? It's really useful to have that on your resume, on your CSV, on your CV. If you have OSCP on there, if you have PNPT, OSW, OSWE, all of these things are really, really impressive to headhunters and to people who are hiring. But it doesn't prove anything. In fact, I'll make it even a stronger statement. If somebody who has OSCP comes to my company, I'll grill them even more because OSCP teaches certain principles that I don't really agree with when it comes to web, for example. I think that cross-site scripting is a very, very valid vulnerability. I think that broken access control, that's something that they do well, of course, but like if you see how limited their web section is, it's super, super, super limited. And it's not like a web is that hard to learn. You can make it super easy with CSRF in there. You can include some stupid stuff, you know. You don't have to make it really, really hard, but I just find it really, really very like not very comprehensive. So I'll grill them even more if somebody comes with an OSCP certificate to me. Then there's PNPT, which is already good. It teaches you how to report properly, how to have mild interactions with your client, I should say, because you have to give a debriefing, which is good. Nothing wrong with that. But it's just not what I was looking for still. It was missing some elements. So then there's almost nothing left except for Hackthebox, which recently bought out their certificate. That is a pretty decent certificate, but they put arbitrary blocks on certain things. Like for example, they block you from moving on from a specific chapter if you haven't answered the answer correctly. Now, a stupid thing, really stupid thing, they said go and pop this specific alert so you can get the document.cookie. And I was like, okay, what do I have to do here? Copy this attack string, replace document.cookie. What exactly do I have to do? I tried like 50 different things. Turns out I just had to attack the machine and actually get the cookie. Cookie was the flag. Stupid shit like that is they blocked me for that and I had to waste 3 hours for that. Like that sounds stupid, but it's not, they don't really teach client interaction. That is my biggest gripe with them. They teach it, but they don't enforce it. And then there's my certificate. Now, what makes my certificate valid? Nothing. Like it's the same as saying, "Oh, I have a piece of paper that I'm gonna wipe my ass with." That's like, I don't really think my certificate is valid. I think my certificate is valid because I wanted to have a way to certify the people who work in my company, and I want to test them to make sure that when a client interaction came in, they would handle it properly. I know that there are a million and one certifications out there to learn how to hack, but I never found one that really enforced that client certification play. So I always hire role playing people, for example, to come into the Discord server, and if the if the candidate doesn't notice, they might send a report or like a vulnerability in the Discord server with a threat actor in it that they don't know. Because we clearly stated me and this person are your proctors, and then the third person is suddenly there. And they might even get my profile picture, change their name to my name. So it's almost identical. And they might even ask, hey, can you send me this report to this email address instead of the original one? We change scope very regularly in the middle of the testing. We give way too much scope. We expect the candidate to tell us that the scope is too big. We expect the candidate to immediately tell us if there's a critical vulnerability found. We shut down servers while they're scanning to simulate that the server is breaking by their scans. We do things like we have a copy of a production website with links to the production website put on a test server, but it's like only a few links, like two or three hard links to the production website. This happens, and you're not allowed to test the production website. If the student is not careful, they will click that link and go to the production website. That's what I mean when I say that my certificate, in my opinion, is better for the people who want to work at my company. I just want to make sure that whenever something like that happens, they handle it properly. And I don't want people to fail because a student failed because they sent like a message to a threat actor. I immediately programmed a new lab and I immediately like made them like start again. So I don't want people to fail. Retakes are always free. There's
Yeah.
nothing stopping people from doing a retake. And
So Do you require all of your freelancers that you work with and the people at your company to have your certs?
If they want to make the amount of money that is normal, yes. If they want to get a little bit less money, I can live with that. Then they don't have to have the certification. But I will monitor them much more carefully, which is why they make less, because my interaction with them is a lot more involved as well.
Interesting. So, one of the things that you said actually when you first jumped on this call, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, is this new website that you're building. Can we talk about this?
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.